Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into crime and safety in Washington Heights today.
Yeah, should be interesting.
Definitely. We've got this DNA info report, and it well, it really digs deep into how the neighborhood's changed.
It has, hasn't it?
I mean, you hear Washington Heights,
Yeah.
and you might think murder capital. Right.
Right, especially if you go back a ways.
Exactly. But get this, the report ranks it as the 24th safest neighborhood in the entire city.
Out of 69. It's amazing.
And 24th. And that makes it, what, the fourth safest in Manhattan?
That's right. And it really goes to show what focused effort can achieve. This wasn't just like, oh, crime went down everywhere.
Yeah, what was it? They really cracked down on the drug gangs.
That was a huge part of it. And also addressing some of the internal issues within the police force itself. Rebuilding trust is key, right?
Absolutely. You got to have that community connection. So anyone listening who might be thinking of moving to the Heights,
Smart move, potentially.
the report actually mentions just 110 major crimes per 10,000 residents.
Yeah, that's way lower than a lot of people would guess, I bet.
Right. So we're talking about a real transformation here, not just in perception, but in actual safety.
And even if you're not looking to move there, I mean, it's just fascinating to see how a neighborhood can change like that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the overall picture. But let's get down to what people really worry about, right?
Their stuff.
Exactly. Property crime. Those everyday worries.
And this is where it gets really interesting because the data on that is surprisingly good.
Oh, yeah. Like, how good are we talking?
Well, for property crime overall, they rank 14th.
Wow, that's high.
But get this, for burglaries, 7th, safest.
Seriously? 7th? That's wild.
Right. Makes you feel a bit safer about things.
Totally. That peace of mind is priceless, especially in this city. But I gotta be honest, things get a little more, shall we say, nuanced when we look closer.
Yeah, nuanced is a good word for it because while those property crime numbers look great,
They really do.
no neighborhood is totally immune to crime, right?
True enough. And that's where this whole thing is really interesting.
What do you mean?
So we've got these amazing property crime rankings, right? But then the report goes on to rank Washington Heights 42nd for violent crime.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that is a pretty big difference.
Right. It kind of makes you wonder what's really going on.
Like, is there something else going on beneath the surface? It's definitely more complicated than just looking at one number.
For sure. And it gets even more complex when you factor in this other thing from the report.
What's that?
So they mentioned this spike in violent crimes between 2008 and 2010.
Oh, yeah, around the recession.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially in the 34th precinct.
I wonder if that was like a citywide trend or something more specific to Washington Heights.
That's a good question. It's hard to say from just this report.
Right. We'd need more data to really dig into that.
Totally. So what's the takeaway here? I mean, we've got this huge improvement in overall safety.
Right. It's way safer than it used to be.
But then you've got this violent crime ranking that's kind of...
A little iffy.
Yeah. How do we make sense of all this if we're trying to get a real feel for Washington Heights today?
Well, I think it just highlights how important it is to be informed, you know?
Like, don't just look at one number and call it a day.
Exactly. Even in places with low crime overall, you still got to be aware.
Right. Take your precautions. Be smart about it.
It's about having the full picture, not just focusing on one aspect.
Exactly. And speaking of the bigger picture, we can't talk about safety in Washington Heights without going back to one very specific event. An event that really left its mark on Washington Heights.
Yeah, we're talking about the 1992 riots, right?
Exactly. The DNA info report really gets into it. Starts with the death of Jose Kiko Garcia.
Tragic story. That incident with the police officer just ignited days of unrest.
The report makes it clear this wasn't just about one incident. It was about,
Deep tensions, yeah.
like this boiling point.
Between the community and law enforcement.
They describe police cars on fire, gunshots, the whole city was on edge.
Can you imagine living through that? It must have been terrifying.
It's hard to even imagine. And it really forced a national conversation about police brutality.
Systemic racism, too. You can't ignore that aspect.
And that whole issue of distrust between communities and the police. It's like some things never really change, you know?
You're right. It's still so relevant today. And DNA info touches on that when they talk about the more recent changes in Washington Heights, like all the new people moving in.
Right. And new businesses,
Yeah.
gentrification, basically.
Exactly. It's a double-edged sword.
For sure. Because on one hand, you've got this investment, right?
Which can be good for the neighborhood in a lot of ways.
But then on the other hand, you've got longtime residents who are being priced out.
Yeah, the DNA info report mentions that a lot of Dominican families are having to move out. It's changing the whole character of the neighborhood.
And that's a tough one. How do you balance progress with preserving a community's identity?
It's a question a lot of cities are grappling with. There's no easy answer.
Well, its DNA info report definitely gave us a lot to think about,
It did. From
and everything in between.
It shows you how complex these issues really are.
Exactly. And that's simple answers, you know?
Rarely tell the whole story.
So true. Well, thanks for diving into this with me.
Of course. Always happy to dig into these topics.
And to everyone listening, keep exploring. Keep asking those tough questions. And we'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.